The last thing I saw before my eyelids grew too heavy to keep open was my sister standing over me, clutching an empty ceramic mug like it was a smoking gun. My fingers were the first to go, curling into useless, frozen claws against the vintage quilt, followed immediately by a terrifying, cold numbness that sprinted up my legs and settled heavy in my chest. I tried to scream, to thrash, to throw the bedside lamp at her, but my body had become a stone statue while my mind remained trapped inside, screaming in a silent, panic-stricken void. My name is Sarah Bennett. I am 36 years old, and in my real life, back in Virginia, I am a senior logistics manager overseeing supply chains for 3 Fortune 500 companies. I solve complex, multi-million-dollar problems for a living. I move cargo across oceans, negotiate with unions, and optimize chaos into profit. I am sharp, I am respected, and I am in control. But inside this drafty Victorian house in rural Pennsylvania, I am none of those things. To my father, Arthur, and my mother, Martha, I am simply poor Sarah, the unstable, hysterical daughter who imagines enemies where there are none and needs to be managed like an unruly child. For years, I believed that distance was enough to keep me safe. I moved 2 states away, built a career, and limited our contact to holidays and weekly phone calls where I gray-rocked my way through their passive-aggressive commentary. But 2 weeks ago, duty pulled me back in. Mom was scheduled for a total knee replacement, and Dad played the overwhelmed husband card perfectly. He called me weeping, saying he couldn't lift her, couldn't manage the meds, and needed my help. Because I am a fixer by nature, I took a month of unpaid leave, packed my bags, and drove north into the trap they had spent 15 years setting. The first week was surprisingly quiet. I managed Mom's physical therapy, cooked high-protein meals, and organized the clutter that had accumulated in the hallways. I almost let my guard down. I almost believed that maybe, just maybe, they had softened with age. Then came the letter. It arrived yesterday afternoon, buried in a stack of junk mail that Dad usually intercepted before I could see it. But he was out picking up prescriptions, and the mail carrier handed the bundle directly to me. The envelope was thick, white, and carried the unmistakable return address of the Internal Revenue Service. It was addressed to me, Sarah Bennett, but at my parents' address, a place I hadn't lived in since I was 18. I tore it open in the kitchen, standing over the sink. It was a notice of deficiency. According to the IRS, I owed back taxes on $85,000 of unreported income from a consulting business registered in Delaware, a business I had never heard of, let alone owned. My stomach dropped through the floor. I ran the numbers in my head. $85,000 meant substantial activity. It meant someone was using my social security number, my name, and my credit rating to run a shadow operation. I marched into the living room where my sister, Chloe, was scrolling on her phone. Chloe is 32, lives in the guest house out back, and has never held a job for longer than 6 months. She looked up, bored. "Where is Dad?" I asked, my voice shaking with adrenaline. "Pharmacy," she mumbled. "Why do you look like you saw a ghost?" "Someone opened a business in my name, Chloe. The IRS thinks I made $85,000 last year that I didn't declare. This is identity theft." She didn't look surprised. She looked annoyed. "You're always being dramatic, Sarah. It's probably a clerical error." When Arthur walked through the door 10 minutes later, I didn't wait for him to take off his coat. I shoved the letter in his face. "Explain this." He took the paper, read it slowly, and then gave me the look that made me question my own sanity for 2 decades. "Sarah, honey, you're confused again. Remember what the doctor said about stress triggers? You probably signed up for something and forgot. You know how your memory gets when you're manic." "I am not manic," I shouted, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. I am a logistics expert. I track every penny I earn. I did not open a consulting firm in Delaware, Dad. This has your signature all over it. He stepped closer, his voice dropping to that terrifyingly calm register. Lower your voice. You're upsetting your mother. You see? This is exactly why we worry about you. You come home and suddenly everyone is a villain. You're spiraling, Sarah. I am calling the police, I said, reaching for my phone. I am filing a report right now. That was the moment the energy in the room shifted from defensive to predatory. Arthur looked at Chloe. A silent communication passed between them, a look of grim necessity. Let's just calm down, Chloe said, jumping up. Sarah, you're shaking. Dad's right. You're working yourself up. Put the phone down. I'll make you that special herbal tea blend I bought at the market. It helps with anxiety. We can talk about the letter calmly after you sit down. I should have left. I should have walked out the front door, got in my car, and driven straight to the police station. But the conditioning of a lifetime is strong. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to believe that my father wasn't a criminal, that my sister wasn't an accomplice. I wanted to prove I could be rational. Fine, I snapped. Make the tea. But tomorrow morning, we are going to an accountant. Chloe went to the kitchen. I sat at the dining table, watching Arthur. He didn't look worried about the accountant. He looked at his watch, counting down the seconds. Chloe returned with a steaming mug of peppermint and valerian root. It smelled strong, masking any chemical bitterness. I drank it in 3 large gulps, desperate to soothe the tightness in my chest. 10 minutes later, the room tilted. I think I need to lie down, I slurred, the words feeling thick and heavy in my mouth. I'll help you, Arthur said, moving instantly to my side. He didn't sound concerned. He sounded efficient. They walked me to my childhood bedroom, my feet dragging on the carpet like dead weights. They laid me on the bed. I tried to sit up, but my abdominal muscles refused to fire. It wasn't sleepiness. It was paralysis. My brain was screaming, wide awake, witnessing my body shutting down system by system. That brings us to now. I am lying here, staring at the water stain on the plaster ceiling. My breathing is shallow. I cannot blink. I am a prisoner in my own skin. The door creaks open. Heavy footsteps enter the room. It is Arthur, but he isn't alone. Another man is with him, someone I have never seen before. He wears a cheap leather jacket and smells like stale tobacco. Arthur stands over me, waving a hand in front of my unblinking eyes. I scream at him internally, but my face remains a slack mask. She is out, Arthur says, his voice devoid of the fake warmth he uses when Mom is around. The blend Chloe made was stronger than usual. It should keep her down for at least 14 hours. The stranger leans in, inspecting me. You're sure she can't hear us? She's a vegetable, Jack. Don't worry about it, Arthur scoffs. We have 12 hours to finalize the paperwork before the hearing. By the time she wakes up, the judge will have already signed the emergency order. I'll be her legal guardian by noon tomorrow, and this whole IRS mess gets buried under a sealed medical file. And the house? The stranger asks. Already leveraged, Arthur replies, pulling a folder from under his arm. Once I have guardianship, I control her assets. I can liquidate her retirement accounts to pay off the loan sharks, and she'll spend the next 10 years in a state facility thinking she lost her mind. It's a win-win. My heart hammers against my ribs, a trapped bird in a cage. They aren't just stealing my money, they are stealing my life. Let's go downstairs, Arthur says. I need you to sign the affidavit stating you witnessed her violent outburst this afternoon. Lead the way, the stranger says. Arthur turns off the light, plunging me into darkness. The door clicks shut. I am alone, paralyzed and terrified. But I have one thing they didn't account for. My mind is still working, and I heard every single word. The darkness in the room was absolute, save for the blue light of a smartphone illuminating the stranger's face. Arthur had left hours ago, confident that his cocktail of herbs and sedatives would keep me compliant until the bailiffs arrived. He thought he had won. He thought I was just the hysterical daughter who finally snapped. But Arthur made one critical miscalculation. He forgot that my job isn't just about moving boxes. It is about risk mitigation. He didn't know what I did in the guest bathroom 5 minutes before I drank that tea. I need you to understand that I didn't walk into this blind. When the mailman handed me that IRS notice, I didn't just yell at my father. I went into the powder room, locked the door, and took a high-resolution photo of the document. Then, I opened an encrypted messaging app and sent it to Rachel Stern. Rachel isn't just a lawyer. She is a shark who specializes in forensic accounting and elder fraud. I had put her on retainer 3 months ago when I noticed my credit score dip by 12 points for no reason. I sent the image with a 2-word caption. It's starting. Rachel replied instantly. Do not sign anything. I am pulling his credit report and the property deed now. If he tries to isolate you, trigger the SOS on your phone. I hadn't triggered the SOS because Chloe had been watching me too closely, but the seed was planted. I knew a fight was coming. I just underestimated how dirty they would play. Back in the bed, the paralysis was beginning to recede. The 14 hours Arthur promised was an exaggeration, or maybe my adrenaline was simply burning through the sedatives faster than biology should allow. The numbness in my chest was replaced by a prickly heat. My fingers twitched. The stranger, Jack, didn't notice. He was too busy scrolling through ESPN on his phone, leaning back in my mother's antique rocking chair. I focused every ounce of willpower on my vocal cords. I needed to speak before the sun came up. I needed to turn the pawn against the king. Kidnapping is a federal crime, Jack. My voice was a rasp, barely a whisper, but in the silence of the room, it sounded like a gunshot. Jack jumped so hard he nearly dropped his phone. He scrambled to his feet, a flashlight beam hitting my face instantly. Whoa, you're supposed to be out. Turn the light off, I commanded, forcing strength into the words. And listen to me very carefully. My father told you I was mentally unstable. He told you I needed guardianship for my own safety. He probably promised you $5,000 to sign that affidavit. Jack hesitated, the light wavering. He said you were a danger to yourself. Look, lady, I'm just here to make sure you don't hurt anyone until the doctors come. I manage a global supply chain, I said, pushing myself up on my elbows. My head spun, but I locked eyes with him. I have a security clearance. I have never been institutionalized. My father is using you to facilitate a felony. When I don't show up to court tomorrow and my lawyer traces my phone location to this room, you won't just be a witness. You will be an accessory to kidnapping and fraud. Jack lowered the flashlight. I could see the doubt creeping into his expression. He was a hired gun, likely a low-rent private investigator Arthur found online, not a hardened criminal. He showed me the medical records, Jack argued, but his voice lacked conviction. He said you have a history of delusions. He forged them, I shot back, just like he forged my signature on the loan documents for the shell company in Delaware. Do you want proof? Do you want to know why he really needs guardianship? Jack didn't answer, but he didn't leave either. Check the county clerk's website, I said. Look up Arthur Bennett. Look for liens. Jack stared at me for a long second, then pulled out his phone. I watched his thumbs fly across the screen. 2 minutes of silence passed. Then his face went pale in the blue light. Holy, he muttered. There are 4 liens against this house. He's underwater by $300,000. He doesn't own this house, Jack, I said softly. He needs guardianship over me because if he doesn't get control of my assets by Friday, he defaults on a hard money loan he took out in my name. He is going to prison, and if you help him keep me here, you are going with him." Jack looked at the door, then back at me. The mercenary calculation was happening in real time. He realized Arthur was broke. There would be no payout, only an indictment. "What do you want?" Jack asked, his voice low. "I need to get to the attic," I said, swinging my legs over the edge of the bed. My knees buckled when I stood, but I caught the bedpost. There is a tin box hidden under the insulation in the far corner. I hid it there when I was 16. What's in the box? The truth. Jack didn't help me walk, but he didn't stop me. He followed me into the hallway, moving with the quiet grace of someone who makes a living not being seen. The house was silent. Arthur and Mom were asleep in the master suite. Chloe was in the guest house. We crept up the narrow stairs to the attic. The air was stifling, smelling of cedar and old dust. I navigated by the light of Jack's phone to the far corner behind the chimney stack. "Here." I pointed to a loose floorboard that looked undisturbed for 20 years. "Pry it up." Jack used a pocket knife to wedge the board free. Beneath the pink fiberglass insulation sat a rusted Oliver Twist tobacco tin. My hands trembled as I lifted it out. I hadn't touched this box since the day Grandma Margaret died. She had pulled me aside on her deathbed, pressing a key into my hand, whispering that Arthur could never be trusted with money. She told me she had protected me the only way she knew how. I popped the lid. Inside, preserved in a Ziploc bag, were 2 documents. The first was a handwritten letter from Grandma Margaret, dated 3 days before her death. "Sarah, my brave girl, your father has a sickness. It isn't in his head, it is in his heart. He has been forging my name on checks since the 90s. I have hidden the real deed and my true will in this box. Do not show him this until you are strong enough to fight him. He will try to take everything." The second document was a holographic will, handwritten, signed, and witnessed by 2 neighbors who had since moved to Florida. In Pennsylvania, a holographic will is perfectly legal if proven valid. I unfolded it. The text was simple. "I, Margaret Bennett, being of sound mind, leave the property at 42 Maple Drive and all its contents solely to my granddaughter, Sarah Bennett. My son, Arthur, is to receive nothing." I looked up at Jack. He was reading over my shoulder. "He doesn't own the house," Jack whispered. "He's been leveraging a property he doesn't even own." "Exactly," I said, closing the tin. "He needs guardianship to prevent me from evicting him. He needs to legally silence me so I can't present this." I stood up, the dizziness gone, replaced by a cold, sharp rage. "Jack," I said, "you have a choice. You can walk out that door and pretend you were never here. Or you can help me burn him to the ground. If you help me, I will make sure my lawyer grants you immunity for tonight. If you leave, I will give the police your description." Jack looked at the box, then at the time on his phone. It was 4 a.m. "Your dad owes me $2,000 for the surveillance job last week," Jack said, a smirk touching his lips. "I hate working for free." "Help me," I said, "and you'll get to see the look on his face when he realizes he lost." Jack nodded. "What's the play?" I clutched the tin box to my chest. "We are going to court. But first, we need to get ready." At 7:45 in the morning, the heavy oak door to my bedroom clicked shut. I lay perfectly still, listening to the muffled sounds of my father's performance in the hallway. "She's still out cold, Martha," Arthur whispered, loud enough to be heard, but soft enough to sound like a grieving parent. "It's for the best. She won't have to suffer through the hearing. Just keep the door locked until we get back with the court order." "Good luck, Arthur." My mother's voice trembled. "Do what you have to do." I heard the front door slam. followed by the crunch of tires on gravel as Arthur and Chloe drove away to cement my legal erasure. They believed they were leaving a comatose invalid in a locked room. They had no idea they were leaving a CEO in a war room. The moment the engine faded, I threw off the covers. "Showtime," I said. Jack was already pulling a small, ruggedized case from his backpack, a field kit he used for infidelity cases. He said, "I got the rapid tox screen results," he said, holding up a strip that showed a bright, damning pink line. "Benzodiazepines and a high dose of muscle relaxers, combined with the video I pulled off the hidden cam in the kitchen, we have them on felony assault." I didn't waste time celebrating. I moved to the closet and pushed past the soft, shapeless cardigans my mother liked to buy me. In the back, inside a garment bag I hadn't opened since arriving, hung my armor. A navy blue, tailored Italian wool suit I wore for board meetings in Tokyo and London. I dressed in 3 minutes. I pulled my hair back into a severe, tight bun and applied my makeup with surgical precision. When I turned around, Jack actually let out a low whistle. The pale, shaking victim from the night before was gone. In her place stood the woman who negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts without blinking. "Rachel is on the secure line," I said, putting my phone on speaker as I arranged the documents on the bed. "Rachel, are we go?" Rachel Stern's voice crackled through the speaker, sharp as a razor. "I'm parked 2 blocks from the courthouse. I have the forensic handwriting analysis from the lab in Philly. They confirmed with 99% certainty that the signature on the Delaware business registration is a forgery matching your father's hand. I also have the affidavit from the IRS fraud division. We are fully loaded, Sarah, but you have to get here before the judge rules on the emergency motion." "We're leaving now," I said. I grabbed the tin box. Jack grabbed his laptop and the tox kit. We bypassed the main staircase, Mom would be in the kitchen, and used the servants' stairs that led out the side door near the garage. The morning air was crisp and cold. Jack's nondescript sedan was parked down the lane, hidden behind a hedge. As we slid inside, I checked the time. 8:25. The hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock sharp. "Drive fast," I told him, "but don't get pulled over." Jack peeled out onto the county road. I opened the nuclear football, a thick, black binder where I had organized every piece of evidence Jack and Rachel had gathered. Tab A, the original holographic will proving the house was mine. Tab B, the surveillance footage of Chloe crushing pills into my tea. Tab C, the forged loan documents. It wasn't just a defense, it was an annihilation. We hit the city limits at 8:50. My heart was hammering a rhythm against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I was in logistics mode now. Assess the threat, route the solution, execute the delivery. We pulled up to the limestone courthouse at 8:56. The parking lot was full, but Jack idled in the fire lane. "Go," he said. "I'll park and bring the digital files in." I stepped out of the car, my heels clicking loudly on the pavement. I marched up the steps, clutching the binder and the tin box. The hallway outside Family Courtroom 4B was a circus. Arthur had been busy. He had packed the corridor with character witnesses, neighbors, church ladies, people who had known me since kindergarten. They were there to nod sadly and agree that poor Sarah had always been a bit touched in the head. Mrs. Higgins, the nosy woman from next door, saw me first. Her jaw dropped. She looked from my sharp suit to my clear eyes, completely bewildered. She was expecting a no-show, or perhaps a disheveled woman being dragged in by orderlies. I didn't stop. I didn't smile. I cut through the crowd like an icebreaker ship. "Excuse me," I said, my voice projecting authority that made them part instinctively. "Make a hole." I reached the heavy oak double doors. I could hear the muffled drone of a voice inside. It was Arthur's lawyer, a sleazy local guy named Miller who specialized in estate disputes. I paused for 1 second, hand hovering over the brass plate. "A tragedy, Your Honor," Miller was saying. Sarah Bennett is a danger to herself. She is catatonic, refusing food, and suffering from severe paranoid delusions regarding her family. Granting Mr. Bennett's emergency guardianship is the only way to secure the medical intervention she desperately needs. I took a deep breath, gripped the cold metal handle, and shoved the doors open with enough force that they slammed against the back walls. Bang! The sound echoed like a gunshot in the silent courtroom. Every head turned. The court reporter stopped typing. Miller froze mid-sentence. Arthur and Chloe were sitting at the plaintiff's table, their backs to me. They spun around in their chairs. Arthur's face went from a mask of practiced sorrow to sheer, unadulterated horror. It was the look of a man watching his own executioner walk through the door. I stepped into the aisle, the click of my heels the only sound in the room. I locked eyes with the judge, a stern woman with reading glasses perched on her nose. "Good morning, Your Honor," I said, my voice calm, cool, and deadly. "I apologize for the interruption, but I believe my father was just telling you I was in a coma." I held up the black binder. I'm feeling much better now. The silence in Family Courtroom 4B was so heavy it felt physical, like the air had been sucked out of the room. I walked down the center aisle, my heels striking the linoleum with a rhythmic, military precision. To my left, the gallery of character witnesses, my father's hand-picked choir of neighbors, sat with their mouths hanging open. They looked from the composed, sharp woman walking past them to the sputtering man at the plaintiff's table, and I could see the confusion rippling through them like a wave. Arthur was gripping the edge of the mahogany table so hard his knuckles were white. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "Your Honor, please," Arthur shouted, his voice cracking with desperate improvisation. "This is exactly what we detailed in the affidavit. This is a manic episode. She storms in here, delusions of grandeur, disrupting a legal proceeding. She is a danger to herself and others. Bailiffs, please detain her." The judge, the Honorable Evelyn Vance, lowered her reading glasses and stared at Arthur over the rim. She did not look amused. "Sit down, Mr. Bennett. If your daughter is in a coma, as you claimed 30 seconds ago, this is a miraculous recovery. I would like to hear what she has to say." "I am not manic, Judge Vance," I said, stopping at the defense table and setting the black binder down with a deliberate thud. "And I am not alone." The double doors swung open again behind me. Rachel Stern walked in, flanked by Jack Sullivan. Rachel wore a charcoal power suit that cost more than my father's car. She carried a sleek metal briefcase and projected the kind of legal menace that makes lesser lawyers weep. "Rachel Stern, representing the respondent, Sarah Bennett," she announced, her voice crisp. "We move for an immediate dismissal of this emergency guardianship petition on the grounds of fraud, perjury, and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. We also have exhibits that require the court's immediate attention." Arthur's lawyer, Miller, looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "Objection," he squeaked, weaky. "This is highly irregular." "Overruled," Judge Vance snapped. "Miss Stern, proceed." Rachel nodded to Jack. Jack connected his laptop to the court's AV system with practiced speed. "Exhibit A," Rachel said, handing a document to the bailiff to pass to the judge. "A rapid toxicology report taken at 7:30 this morning. It shows high concentrations of benzodiazepines and muscle relaxers in my client's system. Drugs she did not prescribe to herself. Drugs administered by her sister, Chloe Bennett, under the guise of herbal tea." I looked at Chloe. She was trembling in her seat, chewing her thumbnail down to the quick. She refused to meet my eyes. "That's a lie," Arthur yelled, sweat beading on his forehead. "She's a drug addict. That's why we need the guardianship." Exhibit B, I said, taking over. Video evidence recorded 14 hours ago inside the Bennett residence. On the large monitors mounted on the courtroom walls, the black and white footage flickered to life. The audio was crystal clear. Arthur's voice. "She's a vegetable, Jack. Don't worry about it. We have 12 hours to finalize the paperwork. I'll be her legal guardian by noon tomorrow." Jack's voice. "And the house?" Arthur's voice. "Once I have guardianship, I control her assets. I can liquidate her retirement accounts to pay off the loan sharks." A collective gasp went up from the gallery. Mrs. Higgins covered her mouth with a gloved hand. The color drained out of Arthur's face until he looked like gray putty. He slunked back into his chair, realizing that the stranger he had hired was standing right next to me. This video was obtained legally by a licensed private investigator who was solicited by Mr. Bennett to assist in this scheme. Judge Vance's face turned to stone. She looked at Arthur with an expression of pure disgust. "Mr. Bennett, you are skating on thin ice. Do you have any explanation for why you are discussing liquidating your daughter's assets to pay loan sharks?" It's taken out of context," Arthur stammered. I was trying to protect the family estate, the house. It's all we have." "That brings us to Exhibit C," I said, opening the tin box. I pulled out the yellowed, fragile paper, Grandma Margaret's holographic will. "My father claims he needs guardianship to protect the family home at 42 Maple Drive," I said. "He claims it is his asset to manage. But he lied to this court, just as he lied to his mother." I handed the original document to the bailiff. My grandmother, Margaret Bennett, suspected her son was stealing from her decades ago. When she died, she did not leave the house to him. She left it to me. This is her original holographic will, valid under Pennsylvania law, hidden for 20 years to keep it safe from the man sitting at that table. I turned to Arthur. "You don't own the house, Dad. You never did. You have been taking out hard money loans against a property you have no legal title to. That is mortgage fraud. And trying to imprison me to cover it up, that is the end of the line." Arthur looked at the document in the bailiff's hand. He made a sound, a high, pathetic whimper, and looked at Chloe. "Chloe," he hissed, tell them she's crazy." Chloe looked at the video still frozen on the screen. She looked at the judge, who was glaring at her. She looked at me, and she broke. "He made me do it," Chloe screamed, bursting into tears. "He said if I didn't drug the tea, the loan sharks would break my legs. He said it was the only way to save the house. I didn't want to hurt her." "Chloe, shut up," Arthur roared, lunging toward her. "Order." Judge Vance banged her gavel so hard the sound cracked through the room. "Bailiffs, restrain Mr. Bennett immediately." 2 uniformed officers moved in, grabbing Arthur by the arms and forcing him back into his chair. He was panting, his eyes wild, darting around the room looking for an exit that didn't exist. Judge Vance stood up, towering over the bench. She was trembling with rage. "In 20 years on the bench, I have never seen such a grotesque abuse of the guardianship system," she said, her voice shaking with controlled fury. "The petition for emergency guardianship is dismissed with extreme prejudice. Furthermore, I am issuing an immediate bench warrant for the arrest of Arthur Bennett for fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. Officers, take him into custody." Arthur began to struggle as the handcuffs clicked onto his wrists. "You can't do this. I'm her father. I raised her. Sarah, tell them, Sarah." He looked at me, his eyes pleading, begging for the daughter he thought he could control to save him one last time. I stood there, smoothing the lapel of my navy suit. I didn't blink. I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eye. "You aren't my father," I said softly. "You're just a bad investment I finally wrote off." "Take him away," Judge Vance ordered. As they dragged him out the side door, kicking and screaming about his rights, I looked at the gallery. The neighbors were silent, staring at the floor, ashamed to meet my gaze. I turned to Rachel and Jack. "We're done here." "Not quite," Rachel said, checking her watch. "The federal agents are waiting in the lobby. They want to talk to him about the tax fraud." I picked up the tin box. "Let them wait. I have a house to evict." 6 months have passed since the gavel came down in Family Courtroom 4B, and the silence in my life is no longer heavy or terrifying. It is peaceful. It sounds like the gentle lapping of water against a dock and the wind rustling through the pines. I am currently sitting on the back porch of a small, renovated A-frame cottage 2 hours away from the toxicity of my childhood home. The air here tastes clean, devoid of peppermint tea and betrayal. The fallout from that Friday morning was swift, brutal, and absolute. The federal agents Rachel Stern had waiting in the lobby didn't waste any time. They arrested Arthur the moment he stepped out of the courtroom. It turns out the $85,000 of unreported income the IRS flagged was just the tip of the iceberg. My father had been running a sophisticated identity theft ring for a decade, using not just my information, but the identities of 3 deceased neighbors to secure business loans he never intended to repay. The sentencing hearing was 3 weeks ago. I went, but I didn't sit in the gallery. I stood in the back, watching the man who raised me weep and beg for leniency. He blamed the economy, he blamed his gambling addiction, he blamed everyone but himself. The federal judge wasn't moved. Arthur Bennett was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. He will be 78 years old when, or if, he ever tastes freedom again. Chloe cut a deal. In exchange for testifying against Arthur regarding the fraudulent loans he had taken out in her name as well, she pled guilty to conspiracy and assault. She received 3 years of probation, 500 hours of community service, and a permanent criminal record that will follow her for the rest of her life. The last I heard, she was working the night shift at a warehouse in Scranton, trying to pay off her court fees. She sent me a letter last month, 3 pages of excuses written in purple ink. I burned it in my fire pit without reading past the first line. And then there is the house. Grandma Margaret's holographic will held up in probate court. The deed to 42 Maple Drive was transferred to my name 48 hours after Arthur's arrest. I didn't hesitate. I hired a crew to clear it out. Every stick of furniture, every rug, every memory. I sold the property as is to a developer for $400,000. The proceeds, combined with the restitution order the court seized from Arthur's hidden emergency cash accounts, meant I was finally made whole. But closure is rarely a neat line. Sometimes it shows up on your doorstep at 7 o'clock on a Tuesday evening, raining and pathetic. 2 days ago, a taxi pulled up to the security gate of my apartment complex in the city. I hadn't fully moved to the lake house yet. The guard called up, confused. "Miss Bennett, there is a woman here claiming to be your mother. She has suitcases." I stared at the intercom. I knew this moment would come. I buzzed her in. When I opened my front door, Martha Bennett looked like a ghost. She was soaking wet, shivering, clutching 2 oversized floral suitcases that I recognized from family vacations in the 90s. She looked smaller than I remembered, her eyes hollowed out by the sudden collapse of the lifestyle Arthur had stolen for her. "Sarah," she choked out, dropping the bags. "Oh, thank God. I had nowhere else to go. The bank took the car. The landlord evicted me from the rental Arthur set up. I have $40 to my name." She stepped forward, expecting a hug, expecting the daughter who had spent 36 years fixing this, too. I put my hand up, stopping her at the threshold. "You can't stay here, Mom." She froze, her face crumbling into a mask of shock. "What? Sarah, I'm your mother. I'm homeless. You have plenty of room. I heard you sold the house for nearly $500,000. I just need a place to crash until I get back on my feet." "The money from the house is gone," I lied. "It's tied up in the foundation." Foundation? She blinked. The Margaret Foundation, I said. I use the inheritance to start a nonprofit that provides legal aid to victims of financial abuse. It's fully funded. She looked at me, confusion turning to anger. You spent my mother's money on strangers while your own mother is on the street? You aren't a victim, Mom, I said, my voice steady and cold. You were a co-conspirator. I didn't know, she wailed, the tears starting now. Arthur handled everything. I was just a housewife. I was scared of him. Stop, I said. Just stop. I stepped closer, looking her dead in the eye. You were in the kitchen when Chloe made that tea. You saw me drinking it. You heard me say I felt dizzy. And when Arthur dragged me to the bedroom to induce a coma so he could steal my life, you didn't call the police. You told him, good luck. Her face went pale. I thought you were just tired. You knew, I cut her off. You knew for 20 years that we were living on stolen money. You signed tax returns you knew were fake. You watched him forge Grandma's name. You chose your comfort over your children. And when he decided to sacrifice me to save himself, you stood by and watched. She sobbed, her hands shaking. He would have hurt me if I spoke up. Maybe, I said, but you had a choice. You could have left. You could have warned me. You chose silence, and silence has a price. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a slip of paper. It was a printout of local women's shelters I had prepared days ago, knowing she would eventually run out of options. Here is a list of shelters in the city, I said, handing it to her. They can help you get job training and housing assistance, but you are not coming inside. Sarah, please, she screamed, grabbing my arm. You can't do this to me. I raised you. I gently peeled her fingers off my sleeve. You raised a victim, I said softly. I raised myself into a survivor. I stepped back and closed the heavy door. I locked the deadbolt. I listened to her pounding on the wood for 5 minutes, screaming my name, then cursing it. Eventually, the silence returned. I didn't feel guilty. I felt light. I moved to the lake cottage the next morning. The Margaret Foundation is already taking its first cases. Rachel Stern agreed to sit on the board, and Jack Sullivan handles our investigations at a discount. We are going to help women who think they are trapped, just like I was. We are going to give them the armor they need to fight back. I still have the tin box. It sits on the mantel above the fireplace, right next to a photo of Grandma Margaret. It reminds me that family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is look at the people who share your DNA and realize they are just strangers who know your secrets. If you are watching this and you are holding on to a toxic relationship because you are afraid of being the bad guy for walking away, let this be your sign. You are allowed to choose your own peace. You are allowed to evict the people who hurt you, even if they gave you life. You don't owe anyone your future. It belongs to you. My name is Sarah Bennett. I am the CEO of my own life, and for the first time in 36 years, I am finally free.